Okay, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to SaberSim's DFS office hours. It is September 16th of 2022. It is Friday. My name's Jordan. I'm joined here with my guy, Andrew, once again. Andrew, what's going on, man?
What's up, Jordan? Happy to be back on.
Yeah, should be fun here today. Apologize for being a little bit late here to the stream. We actually just got done recording a new Behind the Sims, which is actually what kind of took us a little bit getting into office hours here today. So for those that are interested and been waiting for a new episode of Behind the Sims, should be able to get that out here before the end of the day today. Different flavor of Behind the Sims, really. Almost behind the content this time around. It was a discussion between me and Andrew and Andy talking about some of the new videos we want to make, some of the new kind of we're talking about it as a framework of how we recommend people use SaberSim. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes as we're coming up with some of that stuff, definitely give that a watch. But we have a few questions in our queue here for today. We'll go ahead and get started in just a moment. Before we jump in, Andrew, anything that you want to talk about? Anything you got on your mind?
No, I'm really excited for everyone to watch the Behind the Sims, and I thought it was fun making my debut and just having those DFS related theoretical versus practical conversations was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So let's go ahead and get into it here. What we'll do, we're going to pick up with yesterday questions that started coming in yesterday afternoon in Discord. That is where we'll start. We'll make our way slowly over to YouTube chat throughout the show here. As always, if you have questions that you want me to answer, you want me and Andrew to answer here, fire away at us. Discord, Office Hours channel, or YouTube chat is fine. One quick note for those of you guys in the Discord channel. There's a bunch of awesome conversation going on there, back and forth, things like that, which is great. We love that. If you don't mind, try to lean on the threads, the Discord threading functionality where possible. If we can keep the back and forth conversation in there in a thread, it just makes it way easier when I'm scrolling through here on stream to kind of figure out what are actually like the new questions. So again, not trying to crush the spirit of anybody that is having that back and forth in Discord, because that's awesome. We encourage that for sure. But just makes it a little bit easier for me to see like where actual new questions start and stop. So anyway, let's go ahead and just get into this here. So this was from Joe. This came in yesterday afternoon. Good place to start. And said, regarding sim precision, what exactly does it mean with the average number of sims per lineup? If we make a build of 1,500 lineups with precision at 10, it doesn't mean there were only 1,500 sims for that build. So let's kind of quickly do a walkthrough of what the sim precision slider is. So the sim precision slider is determining how many sims do we look at per game per lineup. So default settings here for a NFL 20 max 10 to 50K, and let me make sure that these are actually the defaults here, is sim precision 6, which means the very first thing that happens every single time we build a lineup is we're going to take 18 random sims of a database of tens of thousands of sims of each game and use the average player projections that those players scored in that set of 18 sims to build that lineup. When we build the next lineup, we'll take a different random set of 18 sims of each game and use those projections as the baseline to build those lineups. Obviously, those projections kind of start getting moved around once we start to incorporate things like ownership fade and correlation, but that's the baseline from which that lineup is made. So yes, at Sim Precision 10, you're using an average projection of 1 sim per lineup. If you were building a 1,500 lineups with Sim Precision 10, every lineup is basically using a baseline of a single game sim for every lineup, whatever somebody scored. If you pull out a sim where Dalvin Cook runs for 3 touchdowns, for that lineup, he's going to score like 45 fantasy points. Will probably almost certainly make his way into that lineup. If it was at Sim Precision 9, that sim would still be there, but it would be along with 2 other different sims where he could score a different kind of outcome, and he'd probably be a little bit closer to his average outcome. So that's basically how it works. Andrew, anything to add on there with the sim precision stuff?
No, I would just say that Sim Precision 10 can be so specific.
Yeah.
And I think it's great for showdown, but for main slates, and it's already there by default. You said it's at 6, so I do advise caution of cranking it up all the way to 10 on something like a main slate. I'd say stay closer to the defaults for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just with all the sliders, defaults are going to be a good place to start with. If you want more diversity, increasing your sim precision slider can be a really good way to do that. I would agree with you that, sim precision 10 really does represent something kind of unique, that like the difference between 9 to sim precision 10 is very different than any other one number change here, because you are making the jump to a singular simulation, right? Like with all of the chaos that can unfold in a single game sim, it is a very specific thing. I would say sim precision 10 really only makes sense if you are playing sports or contests where you think you are going to need the true optimal to win. Or that is a likely outcome. That NFL Showdown is a good example. MMA is another good example. You are very likely to need the true optimal, the highest scoring possible lineup you could have made to beat large field GPPs in those contests. If you don't need that, it's probably too high for almost anything else. So even an NFL main slate, Millie Maker, a million actual lineups you are competing against, it is very unlikely that you actually need the true optimal to win. And I think sim precision 10 for me probably still might be too high for even something like that big. What are your thoughts? I'm curious, and then we'll move on. But NFL Millie Maker, sim precision 10, too high, or do you think at that point you'd actually be interested in getting there?
No, I think it's too high.
Yeah.
And I ran some test builds with it last week, and just scrolling through the lineups I was getting, I was like, I just wouldn't play some of these still, and I preferred to bring my sim precision down closer to the baseline.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah, I agree. All right, let's keep it rolling here. There was a quick question here also from Joe about entry exposure. This column, what does entry exposure mean? This appears in a couple different places here. Basically, what it is so like you can kind of think about things as lineups or entries. So if you put a unique lineup into every entry you have here, let me see. I think I can just pull it up here. This is just so I can show it on screen. I don't have any. Oh, yeah, I do. I do have lineups in here. Okay, so lineup exposure and entry exposure. So if you have a unique lineup into every single contest you're playing, these will always be the same, right? Or in this case, I have the same lineup in every entry because it's just a dummy lineup. Then it's going to be the same. If you put the same single entry lineup into every single entry you're playing, that's when you're going to start to see different numbers here, right? Like you could have a player that is in, there might be a player that's in your single entry lineup and only your single entry lineup. So that's only in like one out of maybe 150 total lineups. But because you're playing 10 single entries, they're in 10 different entries. So this is basically, if you took like, what percentage of entries is Jerry Jeudy in? That's this number. This number is what percentage of unique individual lineups is Jerry Jeudy in? That's this number. So
I think it's a good tool for seeing where you are, if you're playing like elevators specifically, and maybe you're rank filling it, where you can see like, okay, I only have Jerry Jeudy in 1 out of 10 lineups, but I have him in 5 out of 15 contests.
Right.
So just knowing that is good information.
Yeah, and I think again, would probably be most useful just to see discrepancies between the two and just make sure you're not getting like blindsided by something you didn't expect. Again, like
right.
If you're using a unique fill method, like either of these unique fill methods, and these numbers are not equal, something's probably wrong, actually. Like you probably messed something up. Like you either have not enough entries, not enough lineups to fill all of your entries, or you have an incomplete entries file, or like something's not right because they should be equal. And if you use the rank fill method, there's going to be discrepancies here. They might surprise you on how big they are. Like you might have a player that is in a ton of your entries, and you're actually not very highly exposed in your lineup. So anyway, let's keep it going here. I just want to actually just make sure I bring this up on screen. This might be one that's a better one for support to help out with here. But C. Pendleton said, is there a certain way you have to fill uploads in DraftKings using a Mac? I keep getting an error saying my header isn't allowed. What it sounds like to me is that this isn't a Mac specific thing. What it sounds like is that you are accidentally uploading a lineups file instead of a entries file, right? So let's quickly. Yeah, and I can actually, you know what? I bet you I can just recreate this exact error on stream. Oh, we just did Sim Precision 10. That's okay. That'll be fun. I might be able to recreate this on stream like really quickly here. We'll build just a couple lineups. I don't want to take too much time here. So the most important thing is just when you're actually like filling, just make sure that you're going through the fill entries up here, right? That you have an entries file loaded, that you're giving us a fill method you want to use, and then you're downloading and opening to DraftKings. If you just download this file, right, this is your raw lineups file. And then if we go over to DraftKings, and we're going to get the nice broken version of DK that keeps showing up on my Firefox here. But then if we upload that lineups file, then you get this error, incorrect player position header. That's what I think it is, right? But if we upload
it.
I think we did. Yeah. So, but if you upload this one, the fill entries, the entries file, everything should go through correctly. So yeah, playing detective here. Tim asks an interesting one here. This is an interesting question here. So NFL Slate's question, outside of ownership discrepancies, what are some tools and or sites that you use to break down a NFL full Sunday slate? Of course, only if you don't mind sharing. Andrew, I'll kick this one over to you first. I'm curious, are there any particular like other, is there other content or like tools or things out there that you find interesting that ends up being a part of your NFL research process?
So I'll say that I will check out the weather report from Kevin Roth.
Yep.
So I think last week Chicago had a big storm, and I got put onto that via Kevin Roth's weather dashboard. So I think that's always something important to check.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good one. And that can be a good spot. I was listening to Lowell's yesterday afternoon. And Brian was talking about like, he feels that, for some of those really bad weather games that projection models don't always get adjusted down enough. And I think that's like, that could probably be actually pretty sharp there. Like that if it is pouring, like, and it is, it's like a swimming pool on the field. Yeah. The projections probably are going to be quite a bit lower. The scoring output's going to be a little bit lower in that game, or at least the variance of that game is like way, way higher.
I think we had that weather game last year with the Bills and the Patriots, and Mac Jones threw the ball 2 times.
Yeah. The wind.
If I remember.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It was
and
like snowing and wind.
I think wind in particular is very predictive of bad scoring outcomes. Snow is an interesting one, just where like I think you can get like sometimes that actually can kind of promote offense just because the guy with the ball knows where he wants to go and the guy playing defense doesn't. Where like so when it starts getting like kind of slippery out there, provided that the quarterback can at least just like deliver the pass, sometimes that actually ends up. I remember like was it Bills Eagles like a few years ago? Maybe 2 or 3 years ago where it just dumped. Like there was like a foot of snow during the game. I remember LaShawn McCoy for the Eagles just went off on that game, like scored like 3 touchdowns. So yeah, I think weather's a good one to look at. I would say for me, like I like listening to, DFS podcasts throughout the week. I'll listen to a lot of the stuff that they do at like ETR and some of the Roto Grinder shows and just like some of the other like sites shows. And I think it's just useful to like kind of get an idea of like what people are looking at, both from ownership and from like a who you want to actually play. And I kind of take like a somewhat of like a Bayesian approach with it, where like if I'm hearing the same name on 4 different shows, that's a lot more in terms of like that player actually being a good play, but also probably being higher owned than if I'm hearing that name on like one show, right? Like if there's like, if one podcast or one article I read likes a guy, that might act like there actually might be a low owned opportunity there. If everybody likes a guy, that's the chalk of the week and like probably still a good projected play. But that's the chalk. So that's what I do. In terms of like tools, I don't think there's a lot of other like tools that I end up doing. I think SaberSim is just so good at doing like all of the tooling that I want it to do that's not really where I don't really go anywhere else for that. But for content and research, like especially for NFL, I listen to a bunch of podcasts and read a lot of the articles that are out there.
I think it's very important to keep your eye on what what people are posting articles about, what people are talking about, especially in weekly sports, football, PGA. People will just get gassed up the entire week. I remember last year there was like a huge pump from Tuesday to like Saturday. Najee Harris played 100% of snaps in his first game, and his ownership was just sky high. So always important to keep your ear to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it helps build some of that intuition. You know, I talk sometimes here on office hours about how, you know, you can build a little bit of an intuitive sense of where, like, I think ownership in particular might be a little bit off. And part of that, like, our ownership model has come a long, long way. I mean, it is so much better than it was even just like this time last year. But there's going to be situations where, like, what did we have yesterday? The Bengals D was the example, right? Like, I feel pretty confident saying that I'm curious what we're at now, but we're probably under on the Bengals D, right? And I think part of that is that it is the defense that just gets brought up over and over again in every, like, we have them as the highest owned defense, but they're probably going to be double this, right? Like, because it's the defense that gets brought up in every single show about week 2 NFL DFS. So anyway, I think that's how you can help start build that intuition out a little bit more. So cool. Let's keep going here. Again, see some questions coming in YouTube chat. We'll get there here shortly. Real quickly, let's go ahead. Keep going. A question from Joe in Discord here. Joe's basically asking for like notes in a build. So on the builds tab, there should be a section that we can use to add notes to the build, reminding us our thoughts and targets. Something like low ownership on player A, or fade Rams, or make sure you lock in player B, or check injury report on player C, something along those lines. Honestly, I'll tell you this, Joe, I think it's a great idea to like do, right? Like writing, I've even, some of our old videos I did with Max, one of the things that we hit really hard is like take notes, like when you're listening to some of the content and doing some of your research out throughout the week, have somewhere you can write that stuff down so that when it comes time on Sunday and you an hour before lock, you remember the things that you wanted to do and you're not trying to remember everything at once. But I'm going to be honest with you, man. I feel like Google Docs are like a old school piece of paper is like going to take care of most of that for you fine. I think this is like kind of a cool feature, but there's like so much stuff out there that we want to build that nobody else has even like ever done before, that I think those are going to be the priorities before we like just start adding notes to the app and things like that. But I do think you're like the spirit of this is definitely right on. I highly recommend, you know, just taking notes as you're doing your research process, whether that's like throughout the week, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, whatever it is. But Andrew, you do anything like that? You have like you ever create yourself like a cheat sheet or take notes or like stuff like that?
More of an old school pen and paper. I just got a notebook on my work desk and I jot things down throughout the week. Even if I'm not at home, scrolling through Twitter, out and about, write it down on my phone. So I think there are a lot of options.
Yeah, I got mine right here. And it actually still from Tuesday, right at the top says fade Corbin Burns. Which is how I ended up on 100% David Peterson that night. So, but yeah, the good old legal pad works good here. Shady makes a good point too. You can name your builds. I have seen people do this before. So like if you're experimenting with like, hey, you know, I don't know, maybe you're heading into this week and you're like, I just kind of wanted to see like what does fading the Raiders stacks look like this week, right? They're obviously going to be a pretty popular stack. This build is not loading and is also the one that I cut off super quickly. So maybe not the best example. But I do want to show you where this pen icon is. So let me see if I can just like fix this real quick. Hang on. Losing steam here. All the excitement of the stream is dead.
I could try.
Yeah, if you've got it up and you want to pull it up on your end. Yeah, Guy Will Gamble said naming lineup sets and builds can be useful too. So yeah, no, good advice there. Me and Andrew just have the old school pieces of paper, I guess, but we've got a bunch of
actually no, I'll wait for you to pull it back up.
Okay, yeah. All right. Let's see. Come on. I don't know why it's taking so long here. This build only has like 85 lineups in it anyway.
What do you think about the Raiders chalk this weekend?
I haven't really dug in super deep and like built anything, or like I don't have like an analytical sense of how I want to play it yet. By the way, the button to rename your build is just right up here. So like, I don't know, Fade Raiders, whatever. I'll tell you what. So last week, like I was in on the Chiefs. Like, I feel like we had a similar situation where the Chiefs were the highest projected owned stack. SaberSim was like, just get more of them. They're the best play. And I did, but I almost wish I ended up with even more. Like, I capped exposure there, and I almost wish I even had more. When I was running some initial builds this morning, it seems like a similar situation. But I just don't know if I bought into the idea that this really is the equivalent situation, that like the Raiders offense is just as deserving as being well over the field on the chalkiest stack in the highest game total of the week. I don't know. On the flip side, I'll tell you what, like I feel like there's less other good teams to get to. Like there's less other stacks that I'm super excited about. I feel like it's a weird week where, there's the premier Raiders Cardinals game. That seems like the premier game of the week, but all of these other, like, I think there's question marks about stacking any of these other teams. Whereas last week I was just as happy to get to like all of these other games that were going a little bit lower owned. So I all of this to say, a lot of words to say I haven't really decided yet, but I don't know. Curious what your thoughts are.
This is my first look at it, but I could just see how the Chiefs pounding the Cardinals into the ground can skew defensive statistics and skew people's views of the Raiders now being in a prime spot to take advantage of the Cardinals.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I'm more on board, and this is just like a quick gut call. I think I'm more on board with eating the Devontae Adams chalk alone than the full Raiders stack across the board. We'll see how that ends up shaking out. But like, it seems like Adams is just going to get like ridiculous usage all year long. And I think that's a great play, even at like maybe the highest overall owned skill position player on the slate. But I might try to branch out a little bit more on the other stacks. But we'll see.
Right on.
Okay, let's keep going here. So long discussion here that has unfolded in Discord about this particular question. Maybe we can give our takes on this here, but for those want to go a little bit deeper, good discussion there in Discord. But question says for the DFS profit plan and strictly bankroll aside, is there a point of diminishing returns for the number of entries with large scale GPPs? For example, the Millie with 500,000 entries. That is, say anything more than 100 entries is excessive. Just curious if there is an optimal entry size or if it's always maxed out if you can. I think there's a lot of different angles to take this particular question. For me, I would say, what do the lineups at the bottom of your pool ultimately look like? Like, are you confident in being able to make 150, 453, however many lineups it is? I guess we're talking about a singular contest here. Are you comfortable being able to make 150 lineups that like you like, right? In theory, every lineup more that you are adding into the contest reduces the equity that other lineups have in the contest because only one can win first. And the top heavier the contest is, the more that effect is amplified because like in a milli, it's $1 million to first and 100K to second. Like the equity taken out of each lineup is actually like a bigger impact. But I think for me personally, I just ultimately want to feel like every lineup I'm entering into the contest is good, is in a vacuum, is positive EV. And most of the time, I would say that I feel pretty comfortable being able to get there with 150 for almost any contest. What are your thoughts, Andrew?
I think bankroll aside, I would always try to max these large field tournaments. I think that on a NFL main slate, there's so many lineups that are positive EV.
Right.
That you shouldn't have any trouble finding them if you know what you're doing. But I don't think like you're going to run out of positive EV lineups in 150 is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think for FanDuel, for a very large field single game slate, I actually think there is an argument to be made that the number of plus EV lineups that you can make and enter into that contest is less than 150. But I think it's probably close to 150 if you were like building the perfect lineups. And I think it's hard to calculate EV precisely anyway. So I think the more practical advice here is look at the lineups that are at the bottom, right? Look at your 140th through your 150th lineups and ask yourself, are these individual lineups that I want to play? And if they aren't, can they become lineups that you would want to play? Can you build lineups in those spots that you would want to play? And if you can't, then figure out how many good lineups you can make and enter those. I do disagree with the general school of thought that you have to max out at contests to be competitive, right? I mean, the more lineups you have in play, the higher your raw probability for winning those contests is, but the more you're also like entering into that contest, you're also wagering more. So those are kind of balanced out. There's not any reason why you can't be plus EV with a single lineup entered into a 150 max. You just should be prepared that somebody playing 150 lineups at your same skill level has 150 times the chance that you do to win on any given night. So,
yeah, I don't have any problem with entering less than the maximum. That wouldn't turn me off. I'm perfectly fine entering 20 lineups or whatever your bankroll will allow. But just going off the question bankroll aside, I would try and max, but including bankroll, because that's the world we live in, I think it's totally okay to enter less than the max.
Yeah. Okay, interesting question here from Max. And said, joined the trial yesterday, used an unedited set of lineups, played 20 lineups in the $1 for the showdown and walked away with $44. Nice start. But how do I dive deeper into analyze now? Why did I not win $5 or $1,000 with my lineups instead? That is the question, right? I mean, that's the ultimate rabbit hole question. How to win more? I think
it's important to make a clear distinction that as much as we would like it to be, SaberSim is not a money printer. You don't, log on, hit the green button, build your lineups and go. I think we always push the fact that SaberSim builds you positive EV lineups out of the gate. And I think that this question is a great example of that, but it really comes down to going the next step and putting in more value to get those higher results.
Well said. I'll leave it at that. Let's go ahead here and okay, so interesting question here. This is from In It to Bake It about contest selection in soccer using the DFS Profit Plan. So says, looking at the profit plan, how do you apply it to more niche sports? Soccer for tonight would be a good example. Most of the low dollar diversifiers are not going to get you anywhere near close to a profit on, say, 150 entered on a night with a 3K bankroll. Somebody watched my video I put out yesterday. Is there a certain amount that you would look for in terms of I'm entering 150 on the slate? I'm not playing contests where the top prize is less than 3 to 4x this. So if that is your baseline, right? That you're playing 150, you're playing a more like a smaller sport like soccer, and you're not playing anything where first isn't at least a 3 to 4x payout off of 150. Here's what I would recommend. I think the profit plan is going to be best fit for sports that have a healthier overall contest lobby. So NFL, MLB, golf, NBA, probably college football, which we don't really directly support at the moment, NASCAR, MMA. I feel like all of those kind of qualify. Once you get into these smaller sports, so that's soccer, Formula One, all the esports, tennis, any of these over here, even NHL doesn't even have the healthiest contest lobby out there all the time. You're going to have to kind of make some balances here to fit that into the particular lobby. Here's what I would do if I was actually like going through and, maybe if you're playing, let's go ahead here and look at this, just do guaranteed, right? Like just GPPs alone for this EPL2 gamer. And I know this is coming up like immediately here. So this isn't even maybe representative of what the lobby actually looks at here. Like, let's look at the Saturday EPL. Okay. So like maybe this is a little bit closer, right? There's going to be a ton of like very small contests in here. What I would actually probably end up doing is scale back your bankroll quite a bit, like your actual percentage of bankroll you're playing, maybe play 1 to 2.5%, and just take some like very sharp shots at the flagship. contest. Assuming that you have an edge in this contest or this particular sport, and like you're skilled at building lineups for this particular sport, I think that's probably actually going to be a better investment of your overall bankroll. There is like taking some shots there. Now, scaling again, the variance of that contest is going to be way higher. It's your only contest that you're playing. You want to kind of naturally counterbalance that. I just don't know how well you could apply the DFS profit plan to a lobby that looks like this. I don't know, Andrew, like if you play frequently any of the smaller sports out there, I would say I generally kind of like mostly grind these top 4 with a little bit of MMA mixed in. Do you have any experience like with contest selection for things like the soccer or the esports or the tennis lobby or anything like that?
The only niche sport I really get into is NASCAR, but even then the lobby is
100K to first most days for like the cup race. So 50K to first this week. Yeah.
So it's not as small as something like esports, but I do like the angle that you're coming at it from. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that doesn't necessarily, I'm not saying like go play the flagship no matter what your bankroll is, no matter what. That could be whatever, like, maybe you're really good at soccer DFS, but you're playing with a small bankroll. Maybe that to you is, playing just the $1 20 max, like, and playing a few entries in this and like taking shots at the $100 prize to first while you build up a larger bankroll there. I think that's also fine too. I just don't think the framework of thinking about things as a contest portfolio and balancing diversifiers and elevators and spreading out and getting all these unique lineups in play, I think is really probably only going to work on sports where the lobby can support that. And if the lobby doesn't support that, then you got to make some adjustments. So that'd probably be the angle I'd take. And that is what I more or less have done when I've dipped my toes into tennis and esports and things like that. I've actually never played a soccer DFS contest, so I probably would not really be able to even tell somebody where to start with going any further than that. I think one time I got like a free ticket to like the first slate of like Euros 2 years ago, and I lost. So I don't know. Anyway, have you played soccer DFS before?
I have not. Until SaberSim starts supporting it, I probably will stay out of the streets.
Agreed. Okay, question from USN. When creating a pool of 1,500 lineups for 60 entries to a slate, after adjustments are made for unique random, are the best 60 lineups uniquely distributed to contests, or the 60 random that meet exposures from the 1,500? It is only from the lineups in your lineup set. So if you've changed this number to 60 and you are unique random filling your 60 lineups into 3 different 20 maxes, it will be only your top 60 here. It will not include any other lineups from the pool of 500, only your top 60. So,
right.
Some questions about seeing who has like qualified and entered for the max challenge stuff. I'll look at that this afternoon and see if I can get a Google sheet up that will like show who's entered so far and who maxed in week 1. It won't be, I don't think it's going to be like automated. So it won't be live. Like if you go and register, it's not going to be there a second later. I'm probably just going to do it manually. But I'll try to get that up for people here. So, all right, cool. Question from Jillaman, who gave me the pronunciation help here as well, which I always appreciate. Also said, "What's up, Jay and Drew?" which is the official name of new office hours at no cost. So there we go. This is now the Jay and Drew show. I like it. I got a complex question stuck in my brain that I need to walk through. So I run different builds for different contests with different exposures to try to get different. However, when I try to copy and paste to CSV and then upload back from the entry editor from FanDuel, I don't know how to determine my complete exposure portfolio for all of my lineups. How do I approach getting all of this information? I mean, unless I'm misunderstanding, I feel like that like happens. That should happen like automatically. Like
the entry editor should read the exposures in whatever file you upload.
Right. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So like, I don't know. Like,
and I know that especially in basketball, that happens all the time. Constantly late swapping and uploading your CSV.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah,
so
I mean,
I would be curious to understand why it's not doing that.
Yeah, even if you've like used all these different builds, like even if I ran a different build to fill every single contest I'm playing here for the Sunday main slate here and fill them all in those individual builds. If I come back to this entry editor screen here, this will still be like a summary of everything. This is maybe the point of confusion. So in the entries tab, it will summarize your lineup and entry exposure to different players and team stacks and stack types across all of these different builds that maybe were built in different like contests and things like that. So or different builds that were built for different contests. So
and it sounds like Gilliman is taking the download lineup file and copy and pasting into his CSV and not using the entry editor because he wants some lineups from each build. But once he submits that to FanDuel, as he says, he can download the live file from FanDuel and then re-upload into the entry editor, and it should read it.
Yeah, so you can re-upload that like edited custom CSV here. This is DraftKings, but same deal for a FanDuel entries file, and that should like update. Now, it won't. In that case, they won't be attached to builds anymore. It'll have your exposures here. So,
yep, give that a shot and let us know if it's not working.
Sweet. Cool. Uncrabby Cabby said, is there any benefit to using the satellite build for large field top heavy contests? Yeah, I mean, I think there's a case to be made there, especially when you start talking about something like Millie Maker, where first is a huge portion, like I would say 35 to 40% of the prize pool, you start getting a little bit more satellite-y. So I don't hate it. You'll see in general, it's basically going to be like one notch up on all the sliders, a little more correlation, a little more ownership fade, a little more sim precision. So I'm fine with that. Cameron said, yo, been meaning to ask this. Is there a contest in FanDuel? Say there's a contest that has, in FanDuel that has a 50 entry limit. What entry limit should I choose on SaberSim? What I typically do, and again, you're not going to see a big difference here, is just look at what the 20 max and the 150 is for that particular contest size and either pick something in between or pick either of them. Like you can see, for example, here, again, this is DK, but sliders will be the same. If you were playing at 50 max and it's, 10 to 50K, 20 max is 436, 150 max is 437. I always lean towards the higher sliders when I'm in between. But picking either of those is probably going to be fine.
Yeah, I tend to lean toward the higher sliders as well.
Interesting question here. It's kind of a fun one. Nancy Drew guy said, if you had to move one slider up or down, which one would it be and why? I'll let you go first on this one, Andrew. I'm curious what your take is here.
I guess it depends what contest, but just for the sake of the question, I would say probably the ownership fade or sim precision, but I'm leaning ownership fade. I wouldn't touch the correlation. I would leave that one alone for sure.
Which direction?
Up. Always up on the ownership fade and probably up on the sim precision too.
Sim precision up was my lean as well, mostly just because I tend to find that what I'm doing in the post-build process on most builds is diversifying anyway. I don't mind ending up with a slightly more diversified pool to begin with. Fun theoretical question. I will, again, always stress that like tweaking the sliders is not the best place to add value to SaberSim. There is not a magic set of sliders that will just one day start just producing the nuts lineup consistently. It is a way to get a strong foundation of lineups from which to craft and make your own. And we put a lot of effort into figuring out what the right defaults are. So anytime anybody asks about
I guess for diversification, increasing your sim precision is good. I think I find myself in like the mid-stakes streets a lot. So if I just have the understanding that the fields are a little sharper, which is why I lean toward bumping the ownership fade up just slightly.
Yep. And I think that makes sense. When the field is going to act a little bit more rational anyway, you can get a little bit more out of fading the ownership because you know where the ownership is going to go. It's going to condense on better plays anyway. So I like it. Let's see. Aaron says, what stacking rules do you guys use for NFL? I'll show you mine first.
This is all you, Jordan.
Okay, cool. What I like to do here is I will use an advanced stacking rule, and I will say a quarterback, and I typically say running back, wide receiver, or tight end 1 to 3, right? And then what I will do is on the run back, I will typically say less than or equal to 1 on the run back, right? And this is going to limit me to QB plus 1s, QB plus 2s, QB plus 3s with an optional 1 run back in every lineup. I think this is just a nice baseline. It's a nice combination of, eliminating some of the lineups that I know I'm not going to play anyway, which would be like QB plus 0s and QB plus 4s, just not builds that I typically want to get to. And it leaves some optionality in there, right? Like I don't like to brute force and say must have 2 wide receivers, even if that's my favorite personal stack, because SaberSim has a lot of value to add in terms of knowing what individual correlations are for different running backs and different tight ends and what the best way to stack different teams are for that particular slate. From there, the one thing that I will do, and also what actually, let me on the run backs, it also will help kind of determine when does it actually make sense to run that game back, right? I think people sometimes fall into a bit of a trap thinking that you need to run back every stack, but those correlations are not super strong. Doesn't always make sense to go that direction. So the one other note I will make is from there, always spot check my 3 stacks or my QB plus 3 stacks, which are actually technically called 4 stacks in the build screen, and make sure that the teams that I'm getting to that have that construction are teams that I think kind of intuitively makes some sense to get there. So like just in general, higher scoring teams that have the potential to put up a lot of points. On a very, very quick glance, I would probably want to look a little bit closer into Washington, Detroit, and New York here to make sure that I was like on board with what was actually implied by this lineup, like that the game script. I think, Washington.
Man, Jared Goff plus 3. I don't know if I could do it.
Well, here's what's crazy. This game, I think last time I checked, has the second highest total on the board. Detroit and Washington. Yeah. So I mean, those teams are different than they were last year. And I think that Vegas has adjusted a little bit. Maybe they're overreacting. I actually think this is the one that I'm least on board with here is the Daniel Jones plus 3. Also with Saquon in the build. I just, and with the Giants D, just not sure I'm bought in there. But I don't know. Anyway, point is, those are situations I like to look a little bit closer at. And I think if you told me like had to make a decision right now, I would probably eliminate these 2. Because there's always other lineups to play, right? Like it's not the end of the world to cross a team off here because you're just getting a different build coming in anyway. So that's what I do. But Cameron says, I know this is slate dependent, but what's a good min-max ownership number I should use? Thank you guys for the help. You want to take this one? You want to get this one started?
Yeah, sure. I think I come at this from a much different angle than you, Jordan, but I really don't have a number that I'm looking for. It's player specific most of the time based on their ownership. So if someone's 30% owned and I like them, I might get 45%. If I really like them, I might get 60%. If I determine the Devontae Adams chalk is warranted, I'll get way up there. But I would say it depends on, it's a player by player decision for me.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Yeah. And I'm not sure if you're talking about the lineup sums, the min and maxes here, Cameron.
Ownership.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I thought it was exposure.
You might be right. I'm not sure if we're referring. I mean, I think that's still a useful answer for thinking about exposures. Do you use the min and max ownership sum options here in the build settings at all? These are
I do not.
Yeah, I don't either. Honestly, like I don't think you really need to use them. I think the ownership fade slider does a really good job. Like so a lot of people I know there's an ETR article out there that says like 75 to 125%, right? That's like, I hear that all the time on this show, coming in through support, that kind of stuff. You'll see if you just build lineups on SaberSim, like a lot of times you'll get lineups that are around that point anyway, not because you set the rule, but because our ownership fade slider already has a good understanding of what ownership is appropriate and it's building lineups with that kind of in mind. So I don't have a good number that I would actually go through and put here. I don't do anything like that in my particular process. And I would say, like, unless you have a number that you feel like your lineups need to be in for your ownership subs, leave it alone is what I think. So, cool. Okay. Another question here in Discord from Jimmy. and said, looking at the team stacks tab, if your stack exposure is way higher than your stack exposure, your stack pool exposure is way higher than your stack exposure, do you think that's a good team to focus on or target, especially for an early build? Ooh, baseball question. Royals are 17% in the pool exposure, but only 1.3 in the stack exposure. I don't ever recall noticing a discrepancy that large. Let's run a build here. Let me get this going for the baseball slate here tonight, because I haven't even really looked at it. And I can
would say
give
just
my
off the
thoughts,
bat,
but yeah, go ahead and let's hear. I'm curious what you think.
I don't know what the other pool exposures are in this scenario, but if the Royals were toward the top and I'm only getting so much of them, I would just bump that back up to it. Obviously, the builder's telling me that for one reason or another, the Royals are not the best play here. But if you think it's too far off, maybe meet the builder in the middle, force 7%, 8%, and still take an underweight stance against your pool, because that's what the builder is telling me to do. But just leverage some of that. Don't be so negatively leveraged against them.
Yeah, and for me, I would say like I like to look for reasons rather than saying just this is the blind rule of thumb. You can do this every slate, always bump up this team in this situation. I would look for like kind of game theory reasons for why I might want to go get that team. Like, let's see. And again, I haven't even looked at the slate, but I'm going to try to do this like quickly thinking about this. So let's go see if we can find a situation like that. So you mentioned Royals. Maybe we get Royals too, but let's like go see. So, okay. So like New York and the Dodgers and the Royals and the and Miami all kind of jump out as like teams that are kind of like that, right? Like we're getting no exposure and they actually like jump out a little bit into stack pool exposure. So I might then go in and like look for a kind of a game theory reason for why I want to get like why I might want to get these teams, or try to kind of explain why they're showing up there. Just even at a first glance, like you could probably explain some of this stuff away. So like I imagine that the Yankees and Dodgers are probably like fairly chalky. I know it's a 14 game slate, so ownership's probably going to be pretty spread out, but like the reason why the Yankees and Dodgers are showing up in your pool a lot, but aren't showing up in your top lineups is because like they probably have a very high scoring expectation, but they might be kind of chalky. So the Saber score is reducing them from there because their ownership is too high. But like Miami or Kansas City, right? That might be a more interesting angle. I bet those are kind of lower owned teams. Those might even be direct leverage off of a chalkier pitcher. Like we can see. So, I mean, Josiah Gray doesn't look too chalky, and neither does who's up against Kansas City. Neither does Michael Wacha. So, I mean, I guess maybe not the perfect example there, but maybe still an opportunity to get to some of those teams there, just because they're probably going to be like less owned, right? Like Kansas City looks pretty low-ish. Curious what Miami's ownership is, but either way, we don't need to get like too slate specific. For me, like I'm down with the idea of using this as like a red flag of something like, hey, look closer into this. Like maybe these are some teams to do a little bit more research on. I don't know if I would just say blindly like, okay, yep, I'm getting 15% exposure to Kansas City now because of this discrepancy. But if there's like a leverage I can get by going to that team, or like I find a lower own angle to go to there, I'm down to do it.
Definitely warrants some looking into.
Yeah, and like the teams that would like really jump out to me tonight would be, let's see, like who are the chalkier pitchers? So like Pittsburgh, Verlander's coming off the IL. Pittsburgh, Oakland, or like Cincinnati or Detroit. Like if any of those teams had a ton of exposure down here, that would be a little bit more interesting to me, just because there's like a really big direct leverage opportunity there. But none of these teams are like really jumping up like 1.6, 1.8. I don't even think Oakland's here. We don't even have an Oakland stack in our 500 here. But sometimes you see that like it's actually like it's, especially against value chalk pitchers, you'll see sometimes situations where it's like you're getting like a lot of the pitcher in your pool, but you're also getting actually quite a bit of the stack in your pool exposure alongside him. And I think sometimes that's a little bit of a flag of like, hey, this is a high variance environment where like it's bad pitcher against bad team is always just like super high variance. And I feel like everybody almost always rushes to one side of that or the other without really thinking like, hey, this could really pretty easily go the other direction. I think, oh yeah, I am ghosting Fisty here. My bad. Let's answer Fisty's question here. Fisty's like the only person that actually opened up a thread in the Discord channel, and then I proceeded to ignore him. So I apologize for that. Said, does late swap try to follow the exposures in the build you use to fill the contest? It will follow the exposures that you have in your projections tab. So what you should do is send the exposures from your build that you like want to use as your like late swap exposures back to the home screen or back to the projections tab, and then it will use that in your late swap build.
Yeah, that's going to become very important when NBA starts.
Yeah,
because if you don't put that in or tell the builder, it'll reevaluate the slate completely, right, Jordan?
Yeah, exactly. So it's right here. So if I think I made at least a couple adjustments to this build. If I wanted to send that back to the home screen now, I'd send it like that. And then anytime I run a late swap build, it'll listen to it there. So, and then there was a follow-up here as well. This is actually a good one here. It says, also, when does the late swap get applied to my entries in the SaberSim app? Can I run a test late swap build without it applying to my entries? Yes, you can. It applies on the download. So if you run a late swap build, I don't think I'm entered into this slate here. Let me go back to NFL. But if you run a late swap build, you can just look at it and see what happens. And we won't assume that you actually entered that into your contests until you press download. But once you press download, we will. So again, if we have my entries file here and I run this late swap build, I only have one lineup, whatever. If I run this late swap build, it is on the download of this build where we'll say, okay, that is now the lineup that we have in the entries file. So that can be useful. Like last week, for example, I keep going back to this example, but we had Ronald Jones inactive for the Chiefs. This is like really the only kind of like some semi-impactful piece of news that came out in the afternoon window. If you wanted to just see like, hey, what changes? You could look, how much CEH do I have right now? Run a late swap build. How much CEH do I have after the late swap build? And if it's not a big change, maybe you stick with your original entries. But if you're suddenly double on CEH, maybe you want to actually upload that file. So that it can be useful. But if you ever get out of whack as well, like sometimes, maybe you ran a late swap build and you downloaded it, but you didn't upload it, or you uploaded it and then also made some hand late swaps after that, you can always just start with like a new uploaded entries file and that'll just reset everything. So.
Right. For one reason or another, sometimes it gets out of whack, and the best thing to do is just go to the site, pull the file. The site will tell you what it has, and then just put that back in SaberSim.
Let's see. Okay. I think it looks like there's some like follow-up discussion in that thread on Discord as well. I'm not sure if there's like a question for us here. Might be a little confused if there is. So, Fisty, let me know if that answered your question. And Troubles, if you are confused as well on late swap, maybe give us a little bit more context on your question there. I'm having a hard time understanding, but and then okay, so follow-up question here from Fisty. As well. Said, follow-up question. I get errors saying I can't meet exposures and I don't have adjustments in my player screen. What I would probably do in that case is like if you have this red thing up here at all, you have changed something. Something has changed. There's a lot of different places to change exposures now here. And it's easy to lose track of it all. If this button is here at all, something has changed somewhere. I would reset this, which will reset everything. Try again and see if that works. If you don't have the red reset button there and you still can't late swap or you still can't run builds, I think probably a better question for support than something that we can troubleshoot here on stream. I would either reach out in the support channel on Discord instead, and actually probably along with that is use the report a problem link here. So when you use this, it sends a copy of your session to the support team. They can just do way more in terms of actually figuring out what the problem is than Andrew and I can do, just kind of trying to test it. So, but cool. I don't see any other questions here. We still have, I know we got a late start, but we still have a little bit more time here, at least before we hit the hour point. So if anybody has any other quick questions you want to fire away before the weekend, get at us now. Andrew, you got anything that you want to chat about? Anything you want to take a look at here? Are you playing baseball tonight?
I'm not playing baseball tonight. No, I'm going to start getting ready for the weekend main slate.
Gotcha.
Did you want to make the announcement about next week?
What?
The for office hours?
Oh yeah. We I announced it in the Discord. Man, you scared me for a second. I forgot what you were talking about. I announced it in the going live announcement here earlier today. Office hours going forward will be at 5 o'clock Eastern time. So that is 2 o'clock Pacific. Going forward, I know we've had people asking, basically since we started office hours here, for us to do it at a later time. The reason why it was at the time it was for so long is we just wanted to really reinforce that this was more, about education as opposed to being a live before lock kind of show. But I think people get that now. I think we've established a little bit of an office hours culture here. And I think hopefully more people will just be able to tune in at that later time slot on a daily basis. So looking forward to doing that. I think also, when we do run builds and we do start to look at things, we'll have more updated projections and ownership and can dive in a little bit deeper when we do want to talk about the slate and answer questions like that. So going forward next week, 5 o'clock Eastern for office hours. So very, very excited about that. But cool. I don't see any other questions here coming in. So I think what we'll do, we'll go ahead and cap it off there. We will be right back here again on Monday at that new time, 5 o'clock Eastern. So tune in, check us out Monday. Obviously, heading into week 2 here, NFL Sunday main slate. The SaberSim team will be around in Discord, in the support channels, in the NFL channels, helping to answer any questions you guys have, talk through strategy, whatever you guys want to do. We'll have most of the full team on Sunday morning as well. Anyway, Andrew, anything else that you want to touch on before we get out of here for the weekend?
Just good luck to everybody this weekend, and I hope we have a profitable DFS weekend.
Agreed. All right. Take care. See you, everybody.
See ya.